these younger women athletes, and even Alexis Raptis, who came up from the team division. I think it's an interesting storyline that we're just starting to see what it's like to grow up with just CrossFit. And I'm curious, and this is like a whole other conversation, but I'm curious because, and Jason, maybe you can even speak to this. Most of us and most of the athletes, like the Annies, the Lauras, they have experience in other sports. They're so diverse in the sense that they grew up playing sports. They didn't grow up playing CrossFit. What is it going to look like in the long term of somebody who just grows up playing CrossFit? Are they more athletic, or are they in fact less athletic and they have some of those holes because they haven't done anything else?
If you're asking my opinion is that you'll actually be less athletic, but better at CrossFit. So I'll use myself as an example. I got into CrossFit when I was 19, 20. Before that, I was playing, traditional sports.
Mm-hmm.
And then I dedicated my life to it for a long time. And I acquired skills that were fitness specific. So for example, I could do weird stuff like walk on my hands. I could stand up paddleboard. I could prone paddle. I could do anything that I thought was going to come up at the CrossFit Games or at regionals or whatever. But I specialized in the gym. I spent 70% of my time, maybe 80% of my time in the gym, and 20%, especially like the 3 months leading up into the games, doing weird stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But those weird things were still all fitness related. And I think that an area that I think some of these athletes, and it just depends. Like if you want to win the CrossFit Games and they're going to be predominantly CrossFit, I think it's fine to start when you're however old. Mm-hmm. But if you're talking about pure athleticism, I think you're missing out on, the use of odd objects, lateral movement, throwing, basic basic movements that you would get in things like track and field or group sports that you wouldn't pick up if you were just doing CrossFit. I even look at like my athleticism purely by doing jiu-jitsu for the last 6 years. And I feel much more athletic today than I was even at my prime of CrossFit, but I was much better at CrossFit when I was in my prime of CrossFit, if that makes sense. So I just think there's a difference there. Like, do you want to specialize in winning the CrossFit Games, or do you want to say you're the most athletic? Because I think they're a little bit different.
I think there's an interesting nuance to it, because like when you look at, for example, an Emma Carey, who has literally been doing it, I think since like 9 years old or something like that. And then you look at a Danielle Brandon, which there's a disparity, right, like in age, probably 4 years, which isn't that long of a time though, when you think about it. But Danielle, she swam, she did gymnastics, she ran track and field, and she did pole vaulting. And she is extremely athletic. And because of that, she's adaptable. She's got hand-eye coordination. She can, I don't know that she can throw. I've never seen her throw, but she can probably throw better than somebody who grew up just doing CrossFit. She can probably catch better, right? And so it's like, when you look at performance at semifinals or regionals, or whatever we want to call it, the people that grew up doing CrossFit probably have the chance to perform better at a semifinal level event because it's all CrossFit. Whereas at the CrossFit Games, this is where I think athleticism comes into play far more. There's 4 or 5 events that are like your performance is driven by athleticism. The long endurance events, the new skill, like we saw Danielle pick up the double cross over under whatever.
Yeah.
Crossover double whatever. And so like that adaptability, we saw her, she didn't trip on a single under. Like those are things that unless you're practicing, right? Because you can just do CrossFit and practice. If your coach is just a fortune teller and knows all the things that are coming up, you can practice all these things. Or when Boz throws something new at you, you can adapt because you've been playing sports for a long time. But I also think there's something else. Playing sports builds a mindset in you that you just can't really put a finger on, like learning to lose, learning to win, learning what it feels like to win. And you want to get that feeling more, being coachable, group sports versus one-on-one sports. Like there's just a lot of nuances to playing sports. And even like you mentioned, like grappling, like getting beat up a little bit, like there's something unique, like there's a value there, that the level of intensity, the self-control, like when you're having to control your breathing to try to get out of a hold, or like, you know what I mean? Like there's just different things that you undergo in sport that you don't necessarily learn in CrossFit only. So I think I don't know what I'm getting at, but I think the future of the sport is like coaches need to begin to implement sport
Yeah.
for CrossFit. Like, okay, we're going to the field today and I'm going to throw a football to
Yeah.
you and we're going to run drills. You know what I mean? Like that's probably how coaching should adapt for CrossFit
Well,
Games.
Jared, I mean, you bring up a really good point. So like, if you think back to like the way Greg Glassman really laid the framework for CrossFit, and he, I just remember when I first got into CrossFit, this is years ago, it was regularly play and learn new sports was a component of it. But as the sport has evolved, right, we almost have gotten away from some of that. And I found it to actually be to detriment of my ability. Like if you look like a Rich Froning, he would go out at the CrossFit Games. I'll remember distinctly, we went to Camp Pendleton one time. We did this event and we did like this triathlon, and then we did the obstacle course at Camp Pendleton. And I remember when I tried to do the obstacle course, I second guessed for like a second, and I didn't have the same athleticism like a Spencer Hendel or Rich Froning had. I just didn't have it. And I watched the way these guys, I ended up, finishing middle of the pack on this obstacle course. But it's with Rich, when you think about the way that he was brought up, he still regularly plays and learns new sports, whether it's mountain biking, flag football, basketball, you name it. He's just playing. And I think those things, along with everything else he's doing in the gym, serve himself well for the games. I think with like quarterfinals, semifinals, regionals, whatever, those are a little bit different. But when you talk about the games, I think the ability to pick up new skills quickly comes from spending time outside the gym. And so I don't know what that looks like for the future. I think the CrossFit Games need to determine what they want to do as in general about that. But I think to your point, Jared, like there might be a coach out there who's like, hey, we're going to go regularly learn and play new sports. The only issue with that is the risk of injury. The struggle that I have is, do I think that CrossFit athletes would benefit from time on the mat doing wrestling or jiu-jitsu? 1,000%. Like it's non-negotiable. But
that's something I want to watch.
But if you hurt yourself, right?
Yeah.
You're now hindering your ability to perform your key sport. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I used to sublease space to a jiu-jitsu gym at one of our gyms, but I never did it because I was always afraid of getting hurt. But man, anyways, I can go off on this tangent for a while because I just think developing athleticism is so important.
No, but I like it. And I love this conversation. And I'm curious if you guys think, so we're looking at the Rogue Invitational athletes right now, and basically all of these athletes are pretty much like have a guarantee to go to the CrossFit Games, at least most of them. So do you think their coaches, if they were thinking forward of training to the CrossFit Games, should implement different sports throughout their season?
Yeah, but not like, let's play the game of tackle football. I think it has to be strategic. You do see, it could be as simple as like asking your athlete to join you on the green for a round of 9 or whatever, like try to see how they do with golf and maybe give them some pointers. Because
Travis Mayer plays golf on the regular.
Yeah. So, you've got like that, right? Which that could provide no value or could provide 1% value, but just like that coordination, learning torque, the accuracy of hitting the ball. Or it's like, let's go play on Thursday, active recovery day. We're not swimming today. Let's go play 21, 3 or 4 rounds of 21 on the court. And like, so it doesn't have to be strenuous. I mean, granted, like let's hit the mat for wrestling. It's very hard to do that without intensity. It's not like let's play 21. You know what I mean? But I do think like smart training is implementing sport instead of running on the assault runner every day. It's let's hit the track or let's hit the trail. Instead of biking on the bike erg, let's go mountain biking this Sunday on this 10K track, not track, but like this 10K, course, and see how you do. And if you excel, maybe we don't need to do that a whole lot, but if you really suck on the bike, like we need to get outside more and get some coordination on the bike and comfortability. So I think it's specific to each athlete, but leading up to the games or even throughout the year, because we see former athletes excel at CrossFit, there's obviously a rhyme and reason to it. So why not add it back for those that never had it in the past?
This episode is brought to you by UCAN. Who can? You can. At least I can with UCAN with one of their easy squeeze pouches that give me the energy I need to get through my workout without causing a crash. When I work out early in the morning but don't want to on an empty stomach because we know mid-wad I'm going to be hangry, I grab one of their super easy on the stomach bars. Chocolate almond butter? Yes please. I may not be a games athlete yet, but UCAN helps me stay focused and energized during my workouts. It delivers steady release carbs for long-lasting energy without spiking blood sugar levels, the key to sustaining peak performance and focus and recording videos like these. Trusted by top CrossFit pros like Scott Panchik and Emily Rolfe, get your hands on these goodies and even save 20% on your first order with our code CHALKUP. Link in the description. Now back to the episode.
I think the CrossFit Games need to determine what parameters they're going to put, but that's just a whole different subject. Like, at what point do you want to? Are you testing these athletes to test their athleticism and pick up skills like instantaneously, like for example the double under, or do you want to be more CrossFit? Like, I think the CrossFit Games need to determine at what margins do we want to test, and if we're open to anything, I think that's fine. If that's the charter of the CrossFit Games, but. Or do we want to narrow the focus a little bit more so that our athletes really show up? It's going to determine what the games dictate for the next 5-10 years to come. But I do think if there is this factor of like, how well can you adapt to a new skill, then the coaches are going to have to adapt to that and start thinking about how to incorporate those new skills. And, it's funny. We talk a lot about this direction, but I don't think we talk a lot about that direction. Here's what I mean. You take an athlete in any sport, let's just say it's a cyclist, and they can't perform a pull-up. As an example, all of a sudden you get them to perform a pull-up and their cycling gets better. Why? I don't quite know. And that's just an example. You could use that for jiu-jitsu, whatever. But we talk about how athletes in a specific sport, they eventually become really proficient at that particular sport. So when we get them out of it and we hit the gym, all of a sudden when we hit these specific markers, their sport increases. But we never talk about the person that's really good in the gym. If they then expose themselves to these different sports, what impact that would have on their ability outside the gym. I just think it's something that's, should be talked about a little bit more. It's just, again, the factor in there that I think is really important to acknowledge is the risk to benefit reward, and seeing, if you do have someone out there learning this new skill and they, twist an ankle, all of a sudden they're out for X amount of months, and that might not be worth it.
So since the goal of the CrossFit Games is to crown the fittest man and woman on earth, what if next year Boz is just like, all right, we're going to the basketball court. We are considering being able to shoot from the 3-point line and score a basket as a component of testing the fittest.
I think there would have to probably be some other levels of classic CrossFit in it. I think there was an event with like shooting, and it was like measuring accuracy. So like if it's, like 1 500-meter row, 10 barbell squat cleans, and then like the interval style workout to see how many 3-pointers you make. Like that would be a cool event. And it wouldn't, it wouldn't just be like, let's just go shoot hoops, because then clearly the best basketball player is going to win. There's no like fitness involved. So now that I think of it, that sounds actually like a really cool event, like 4-minute interval, 500-meter row, 10 cleans, 3-pointers.
I kind of want to see who's good at all
maybe
sports,
it's like
too.
2-pointers and 3-pointers serve as points, right? So if you want to take a risk and just stay behind the 3 the whole time and get 12 points, but if you're like, no, I'm just going to get as close as possible and shoot a bunch of 2s. I don't know, but like.
Are you done programming all the workouts for the Zalos games?
Yeah. We've got a basketball hoop involved this year. Yeah, no, nobody would come back.
That's a question that the games need to answer, I think, soon, is like, at what margins are we going to, if we're going to claim it's the fittest on earth, what does that really mean? Or are we just going to test for the best CrossFitter and let's rock and roll with CrossFit stuff and make it where people know what's going on, right? Because I just think that conversation has to be had at an HQ level to dictate where the sport and how it's going to grow in the future. Because are you going to attract new audience with doing, like, for example, I think this basketball thing would be fun to watch, but like if someone just turns it on TV, they're going to be like, what is going on here?
What is this?
Or chaos.
Yeah, it's just pure chaos. Like, but I think it'd be, anyways, I just think that the sport needs to determine where they want to go. My recommendation would be to make it more like find the best CrossFitter, right? Find someone who's good at these things. And that's the audience that's going to be attracted to it. If they want to be interested in watching basketball or shooting, they're going to go identify sports that pursue those things. That's just my take. But if the sport wants to be all about randomized and unknown, unknowable, then, you got to start throwing in things like that. Like I remember one year, the games, we hit a sledgehammer, a spike into the ground. We've done all kinds of weird stuff. Like I even at Rogue a couple of years ago, a really fun event was the biathlon. I thought that was really cool, where you shot the target with the airsoft gun or whatever, pellet gun, and then you're on the ski erg. It was a really cool event because it taught you, you had to control your breath before you hit. And Jared, actually very similar to what you're referring to, is that if you shot too early and if for each one you missed, you had to do a 200-meter ski. So there's like a payoff. Do you take longer and try and hit your shot, or do you say screw it and just miss them all and just ski 1,000 meters? So there's some gamification to it too.
Yeah, you're right though. To build it as a sport, there has to be a higher level of consistency, right? When we watch the NFL or the NBA, we know that there's not going to be a new rule every time we watch. And so then there's a greater attrition when there's always new stuff, because if it's new, we don't know that everyone from last week will like it this week. And so to create more retention, you're right. I think consistency is so important. It's like, and I don't have the answer for this for sure. I'm no expert. But it's like, how do we find a balance in providing consistency, but sticking to the methodology? Or does the methodology need to change? I think Bill and Chase on their podcast talked a lot about get rid of unknowable.
Yeah.
Just get rid of it. Like tell all the athletes to work out a week in advance so we can see the highest level of performance, so fans know in advance what's going to happen. And I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not here to make a statement on that opinion. But I do know that in order to grow the fan base, like we can continue to attract athletes that like the unknown, but to grow the fan base, which is ultimately how we drive the economy of the sport, get on TV more, increase the earning potential, all that fun stuff. To do that, there has to be probably a little bit more consistency. There can't be row clean basketball shots for sure if we want to grow this.
That'd be a fun, it'd be a fun event is to do at the ranch. I should text Dave and be like, hey bro, let's do like a squat clean row basketball, because he has that hoop at his ranch.
Yeah.
That'd be fun to like something like
that.
Yeah.
Dude, I better get an invite, even though I'm horrible at basketball, but
me too.
I programmed it, so I have to get,
Jamie Hagia is your girl. She would
she would win.
Phenomenal. She's always doing CrossFit with like basketball.
Oh, you know who would do well is Katie too. So Katie played for University of Ohio. I hope she's gonna get so mad if I get the Buckeyes. So she played for Ohio. She played basketball for them, and so she's really good at basketball. So she'd probably love that event.
It's Ohio State.
We'll get it planned.
The Ohio State. Yeah.
Is it Ohio State University? I don't know. Yeah, but anyways, consistency I think is the key. But somehow meeting that in the middle with what we've always known to be, consistency, but also like providing some level of adaptability. I think, in my opinion, the double under cross event would have been a little better if they just knew a day in advance versus a couple hours. So something, but this is all a learning lesson, right? It's like you can't really put that on Boss because for one, it's his first year. Two, like every year the games is supposed to be a little different. How do we create a unique approach each year without being too weird, and I don't know. I'm thankful I'm not in charge of finding the answer to that.